Professor Dr. Bill Eliason is a retired Air Force officer. Served distinguished career in the Air Force. Graduating from the Air Force Academy. I guess we don't hold that against you, but and serving in multiple assignments, operational assignments. One highlight I would mention for those of you who know the Air Force, he served in Checkmate, which is probably the most strategic planning organization in the Air Force. And if you recall your Desert Storm history, the air campaign was really planned by Checkmate, and so all the air power enthusiasts out there would you would know to refer to Checkmate and John Warden's 5 rings and you know the great theories of air power. Checkmate has really operationalized all of that. So he's served there. He's also taught at the Joint Advanced Warfighting School at Norfolk, which is again the premier joint warfighting campaign planning school for our joint force. He's a graduate of the School of Advanced Air Power Studies, and which is the great school for operational art. All the advanced warfighting schools of the Army, Navy, or Army, Air Force, Marines, and because the Navy doesn't have, they're just advanced already. And, that's what if you go to Newport, you're but he's here today, and of course he also teaches at the Eisenhower School at the National Defense University. So he teaches here, teaches there. He's taught, as I said, at the Joint Advanced Warfighting School. But he's also the editor-in-chief of the Joint Force Quarterly. And so we're fortunate to have him here to talk about something that we are all concerned about and interested in, and that's getting published. All of you as current and future practitioners in the national security space, this is one of the journals, particularly for military and joint operations, that is the strategic communications tool of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and really is a place for advanced thinking and sharing new ideas, as well as history, because there's a great history section always in there as well. But it is really the journal and the publication that advances thinking in our military. So we're very fortunate to have him talk about that and to give us advice on writing and publishing and tips that will be valuable both in the rest of your time here in SSP. I know some of you are about to graduate, so maybe the next couple weeks it will still be valuable. And for those of you who are continuing on, I guarantee this will be good advice for you for the future. And I look forward to it. So thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Dave. I wish my parents had been here to hear that. They have no idea. To my students, you can go to sleep for probably the next 10 minutes because I'm going to talk about me. I see Travis is here. Who else is here? Anybody from my fund? Yeah, I see you. Hide in the back. I got you, man. I got you. This is great because, as I'll tell you, I got more of you guys showed up for this than showed up for class Tuesday night. That's pretty good. Yeah, Dave told you pretty much everything you need to know about me, except that until I became editor, at the time that was editor, they made me editor-in-chief. Really by default, they kept cutting my staff, so I was the only one left. No, it's partly true. So I'm here to kind of tell you about things I've learned in the last almost 5 years of being the editor of JFQ and what that might mean to you. I have, Dave didn't mention, my PhD is from Old Dominion University down in Norfolk. I finished my military career while teaching and getting my doctorate at the same time because I thought, you know, I really need to do something other than be a hand-waving Air Force strategist, because there's not a lot of jobs for that when you're done, figuring out how to blow up countries as a civilian. So here I am, I guess. Good news was there was a command down south called Joint Forces Command, which should not be confused with my journal title. They no longer exist, and that's sort of the reason why I'm here. I was likely to go to work for those guys, but then somebody named Secretary Gates said JFCOM's dead, and the companies that were going to hire me almost simultaneously called me and said, you were our guy, but our contracts are frozen. Honey, move number 15 is coming up, and it's probably to DC. So I went hunting for work up here with a brand new PhD and a lot of practical experience, but as you'll probably find in this town, teaching within university programs you have to bring something special. Most professors, as you know, are guys with deep academic backgrounds. Mine, like Dave's academic background, is mostly running around places trying to figure out how to get an enemy of the United States to lie down and call it quits. You don't get a lot of vitae out of that works on the academic side. But nonetheless, as a student, a professional one, I got 2 masters, a bachelor's, and a PhD along the way in a lot of other schools. I know what it means to be a student, and I understand the pain you're going through. I also know that I, as an officer in the military, typically officers in the military do not write for publication. They don't want to get highlighted that way and possibly become a lightning rod for if their bosses above them don't like what they wrote. That can be somewhat career limiting. And I'm one of those guys. I guess I was just too scared to write or didn't figure my writing was good enough. And some of my academic experiences proved that was true. So I kind of would be one of those guys that them that can't do teach, I guess, or those who can't teach become editors. I don't know. So I do all of those things. And while I joined the university at the northern campus, as David mentioned, the National Defense University, just to kind of tell you where I'm from, is a U.S. government organization. It is a part of the Department of Defense. The president of the National Defense University is a serving military officer, currently a 2-star Marine general by the name of Padilla. He reports to the Joint Staff, to the J7, that's the doctrine, training, education kind of guys, who is a 3-star at the moment by the name of General Waldhauser. He's also a Marine. And he, of course, reports to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Martin Dempsey, General Martin Dempsey. So I kind of go through a bunch of Marines, fight through them to get to General Dempsey if I need to. But to tell you, I really don't get calls from General Dempsey. General Waldhauser, I don't think I've ever met him. General Padilla and I met a few weeks after he came in as the new president a few months ago and said, "You're an editor. I don't need to be in your business. Try not to embarrass the university or any of the people in your chain of command and things will work out just fine." I go, "Got it, sir, I can do that." So that sort of gives you my left-right limits as an editor of what I can accept. Now, I have a mission, like all military organizations. This journal has a mission, as the university does. University's main mission is to bring in pretty much mid-career officers from all 5 of the services, to include the Coast Guard, and also the Guard Reserve from each of the services also get to attend, and they are the select officers from each of those organizations. So if you're a C+ student in your military career, you're probably not going to the National Defense University to go to school. It's kind of the way that works out. Also has folks from the interagency. Virtually every agency within the federal government has, at one time or another, had a student within our colleges, and we try to encourage that so we can spread kind of some understanding of how the Department of Defense works. As you all know, we are the biggest part of the federal government. And you may have seen an NPR piece a couple weeks back that the Department of Defense is the #1 size organization in terms of personnel that works for it in the world. Anybody know what the #2 one is? Come on, you guys are studying security studies, must have some idea. Want to guess? Walmart. Nope, Walmart's #3. The People's Liberation Army of the People's Republic of China is #2. So, try not to make the People's Republic of China 10 feet tall. They're only 8 feet tall. The Department of Defense is 10 feet tall, and Walmart is at least 6.5, maybe 7. So it's a big organization, and so it's important for that big organization to get some sense of what the other parts of government do and vice versa. So they do like you do in class, if you're smart, and those of you who are close to graduating, you probably are. The #1 program I hear by foreign policy and the type of studies you're doing, that's serious business. You should put that on your resume. Just saying. It might work with me as editor, maybe not. But these students need knowledge, as you do. And the area this journal works in is security studies writ large, but it primarily was organized by General Colin Powell back in 1993-94. He turned to the Joint Staff and said, you know, all those services out there, the military services, they seem to have serious journals, but the joint world does not. Now this, if you know your history, is at least 7 years after the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, which was meant to make the services work more closely together in terms of jointness. An affect of that is this journal, which came along a few years later when Colin Powell was chairman. So it's been in business for 20 plus years. I'm about the 4th editor to be there. I think the recent issue we just pushed out last week is my 17th. So I got a certain amount of longevity, not much, but I've been able to get through what the journal asked me to do, is not get anybody really mad at me, and that's good. But nonetheless, I don't shy away from controversy. If someone wants to bring a piece to me that's controversial, okay. But I'll tell you in a few minutes, there are limits to that too, and there should be in your writing. You don't want to be so controversial that you become, no kidding, a lightning rod, because that means a whole bunch of audiences will stop listening to you. and I'll explain about that in a minute. So what I'm here to tell you about is how you can help me in my other mission of feeding things to that hungry mass of folks who are coming through the university at all the various schools we have, which include the National War College, the Eisenhower School for National Security and Resource Strategy. It's a very long title, doesn't fit very well in a ball cap. Used to be called the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, or ICAF. Also the College for International Security Affairs. That's basically a counterterrorism graduate program. Mostly internationals are in that, but some Americans as well. It's in the building I'm in Lincoln Hall. As well as the Joint Forces Staff College I mentioned, as when another one is called the I-College, or the Information Resource Management College. It primarily does, helps the various services, military services, develop people in the IT world for management purposes. Each of those grants a degree, by the way, a graduate degree of some kind. So there is rigor in those programs. Many of the students are not happy about that. They'd rather just kind of have a year off from fighting wars, but that's not what those war colleges are anymore, and they probably haven't been that way for a good 15 to 20 years. So while you're suffering through here at Georgetown, there are some folks maybe a few years older than you. They're getting beaten to death in a one-year program typically to do a two-year program. So that's kind of what we put them through. I need to feed that monster. I need to provide high-quality stuff through this journal and some other products that my press runs, and I run the NDU Press as well. And so I need high-quality writing on topics that are a broad range of things that all of you are now interested in, because you've signed up to be a part of the security studies world, whether you want to be or not, no matter where you go or what you do. What the Department of Defense is interested in probably should interest you. So let me see if I can make the slides go. I have technological capabilities. My students see me do it all the time. Let's see if this works. Let's go with that one. Yes. So here's my objective, and it may take a little longer or not. You got plenty of free food to eat, so do that. If you have to go to the bathroom and get up and go down, fine. If I say something you're not sure about and you want to ask a question, just hold it to the end, and then I'll make sure I get them all. If there is one.
I'll get one for you.
Yeah, it doesn't
You go
matter.
ahead.
I can lean. Yeah, I'll keep talking. My wife says I don't have any problem with that. So, my main mission is to get both quantity and quality out of those out there who might write. I don't have that problem. I get quantity, and I'll give you the bottom line up front. Here are your odds. And this is with my journal. I can't speak to other journals. I'm not their editor. But I will tell you, there is a peer process for mine. It may take 3 to 6 months, maybe a little bit longer to get you in, but here are your odds. What do you think the odds are of getting in a journal? If you wrote me one right now, let's say 5,000 words, and it was on a really interesting topic, and you were an A student, A+ student in your class, and you sent it to me, and 3 to 6 months roll by, what do you think your odds are of getting through my review process? Just take a guess. Anybody?
20%.
20%, so like 1 in 5?
Yep.
Okay, anybody else want to guess?
5%.
5%, okay? So I'm a really hard grader then.
50%.
Talk to some of the people in the room and tell you whether I'm a hard grader or not. The answer is about 1 in 4, 1 in 5. But depends on your topic. Yeah, and I'll give you that in a few minutes. There are some topics where your chances are almost close to 100% if it's well written of getting it, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So it's kind of surprising. Now, there are other security journals out there who, you put it in there, and you're like 1 in 100 chance of getting in, just because you're an undergrad or you're a grad student. It may take a long time, and you go through the double-blind, triple-blind peer review process, and you don't hear anything for 2 years, and you write the editor, and he goes, "What was your name again?" You're going to hear back from me at some point, or my executive editor. If you hear from the executive editor, that's a reject. Although if he calls you and starts asking you questions about how to modify your article, that means you're in. I typically don't tell people they're in until just as we're going to press, and there's lots of reasons for that, and I'll explain in a minute. So if I can get things from any of you, and you go fishing and it doesn't work, it's okay. Don't fall in love with your paper. Any of you planning on working in the Pentagon anytime soon? There are 3 rules for working in the Pentagon. You ready for them? Get a good, comfortable pair of shoes, because you're going to be walking everywhere. There are exactly, I think, 1 elevator and maybe 2 or 3 escalators in the whole damn place, and it's one of the biggest office buildings in the world. Your office will be in the basement, and your boss will be on the 5th floor, and on the other side of the building. So that's a comfortable pair of shoes. Get to the gym anytime you can, because that's going to help you with a shoe problem. And last but not least, never fall in love with your paper, because there's at least 100 other people who think you suck. That's just the way it works. I'm just telling you. And that's sort of the way it is in the journal business as well. But you're in luck, because I'm the first screen you're going to go through with your paper, and I'll explain the rest of it in a minute. Next one. I got it. Electronics. Drop the bomb. So what I'm planning to try and give you some sense of the journal. I usually pitch this to people who are in school at the National Defense University and other colleges like the Naval War College, the Air War College, and so on. So it's mostly to that audience, but you guys, because I know you, you fit in that world. This is the things you should write about. I do not exclude any author. Let me say that again. Anyone who can give me a MS Word file with English that's legible, they get in. At least you get a shot to get reviewed. We review everything that comes in. I read every single one of them. Now the trick is get me off the first page. If you get me past the first page, you got a better chance of getting in. But if I don't understand what you're talking about in the first paragraph, just like in school, it's probably not an A paper. Just telling you. Here's another good thing to know about. I don't do literature reviews. You can forget about that. That's not a concept this does. This is for busy people who want to take a 15 minutes, read an article, and have some sense of the whole issue, at least from your point of view. If that opens up things to you, great. Physically, what's your audience? This is the other thing I tell authors, the most important thing you can do when you're writing. Even if you're writing for a graduate program, this is for some of you who are still in the 500 level, know your audience. In the case in school, your audience is what? One person. It's the teacher. You're not trying to impress the kid next to you. That doesn't matter. They're not grading you. The professor is. So that's one. That's a whole different deal than when you're going for a journal. A journal, it can be upwards, in this case, of 100,000 people or more. And what you want is, and I track my online capability, where I know exactly how many people are reading your article once it gets published over time. You want to get up in the thousands, because that gets your name out there, and it means your ideas are important and are sticking to somebody else. If you write an article and it gets 2 people to read it, it's you and somebody else, or you keep reading it 1,000 times. Okay, I might not know the difference, but whatever you use your time for, it's fine. Like all government things over the last several years, we've been constrained in budget. The press, as it was over time, when I came on board almost 5 years ago, there were 10 of us. We're now down to 5. We're pretty steady state at 5. They also cut my budget by 60%. So I have a smaller journal than when I started 5 years ago. So the competition is somewhat higher, maybe more towards 1 in 5 than 1 in 4. But you have to catch me on a good day. Some days I'm really happy, and I said, yeah, that one looks good, and I'll hand it off to the reviewers, and the reviewers say it looks good, and it gets in. So we really like to have our pieces that are about 5,000 words or less. I knew you would write that down. It's okay. I'm going to give you a link. You can go on the link and I'll tell you all the submission guidelines I'm going to talk about today is in that one piece. And if you forget, you can email me and I will send you a copy of it. It's a piece of cake. So if you want a copy of JFQ, you can get it online. Any of you who are online at the moment, if you type in JFQ into Google or whatever search engine you're using, or your Joint Force Quarterly or National Defense University Press, it's going to come up. We have 2 sites. One is run by the Defense Media Agency, and the other one's run by the Joint Staff, so there's no way we're ever going to lose JFQ. It happened to me about 2 years ago that we did. We had one site, and somebody from somewhere out in malware land came after it, and we were offline for 2 months. Not what you want to be in the online journal business. We produce about 12,000 hard copies, and if you wanted one, all you have to do is write me, and I'll be happy to send it to you free of charge, and put you on a subscription. You can get it that way. Some of you are younger than me, I think. I still read it in paper because I can. And then the links here too, and I'm sure they'll give you the brief, but basically it's my home thing. There's more on that website than just JFQ. There's all the research pieces that are open to the public that we publish. We have a research arm to the National Defense University. It's not very big, but what they do write about would be all pretty much security related things that you might find interesting. We just published a piece by a Navy commander who is on a fellowship from United States Pacific Command about China and some of those issues. And that once we got it up and online, that thing went viral. I mean, we've already had, I think, upwards of 10,000 downloads already. If you're writing on China, just to give you an idea of my audience here, I have about 90,000 people who download stuff, individuals, which means there's a higher number of downloads because of articles they pull every quarter, and that's been rising, about 25% or more a quarter. And about a quarter of the audience is tracked back to servers in the People's Republic of China. So, we're international. It's not just something that goes to the DoD or even Department of State or whoever. This thing goes all around the planet, whoever wants to download it, so people are reading it. So you have an audience. Also, it goes in this Joint Electronic Library that's run by the Joint Staff. That means that students looking at stuff in the National Defense University or who have access to that or looking at doctrine or whatever, they will see your article from now until that server is blown up in the Armageddon that's to come. So you will live. Your stuff will live in this electronic world at least, and maybe in paper a little less longer. But I've also got a couple of different storage areas where I've got old versions going all the way back to #1. So it's possible somebody might ask for it in paper, but So I said 80K, it's upwards of about 90K right now, and I've pushed my internet editor to try and get it to 100 grand. She's working on it. But in the end, if you got a question, I'm just like one of the professors here, you'll be able to find my information online. Drop me an email or give me a call, and that'll work. So here's how you get it done. I tell everyone this, it's not that hard. The hardest part about getting into a journal is psychological. It's like anything. You have to figure out your audience, you have to force yourself to write and read and make something good out of it and revise and so on, and then figure out who to send it to. The other trick in this thing is give it to somebody else to read. How many of you think, and this is where the immodesty part comes in, honestly, you can put your head down if you want anybody else to know. Put your hand up if you think you're really great at reading and writing. You're all wrong. Every one of you are. This is a premier program. You didn't get in here because you were really poor at writing or reading. I haven't come across one. I may be wrong. In 3 years and now, going on about 40 students, I haven't hit a bad writer yet. There's some that got the B, I get it. But these are really good quality writers. You are. And I can base it up against the folks I've seen in 9 years of teaching with the National Defense University. You are at or better than all those folks out there who think they're going to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I'm just telling you. So use that. It's a weapon. I mean, in the world of ideas, those who have the sharpest knife and the quickest pen get out there and get it to happen. Now, Tom Ricks didn't wake up a natural-born writer. It took him some time, and he had to try. And you got to get in the pool and start swimming. So that's what's going to happen here for you if you do it right. But have somebody else read it. It may be brilliant to you, but the other person doesn't understand it. If that peer helps you at all, that gives you, again, a slightly higher chance of getting me to like it. And I'm going to look at it once, maybe twice. If I see a glimmer of something cool in there, maybe it gets past me, maybe not. And the other thing, too, is try and write English, American English, whatever. If you're like a lot of military guys do, they put so many acronyms in there you can't find the verbs. That's not good. Even for a military or security-oriented audience, you will be required by my lovely editing staff to define the thing first, and then you can use it a little bit later. But you find it surprising. Even writing security writing without a whole bunch of acronyms actually makes the piece better to understand. I mean, it's just kind of that simple that way. And the three big things I didn't talk about yet, jumped right to the bottom to some extent, is I put up this, by the way, you versus 90,000. It's a bit of a dated slide. Three main things should go on any paper you ever write. I mean, no kidding. I'm not an English major. I'm not. Although I did pretty good in English in school. I didn't do very good at physics, but I did really good in English. Tell the person what you're going to say. And this is, for those of you who have any relationship to the United States Air Force, so you can see where that's coming from. For me, this is what they beat into you on how to teach and write in the Air Force. Tell them what you want to say. Don't tell them everything, but just get them engaged in what you're going to talk about in that first paragraph, maybe in the first sentence. If you haven't hooked them, and some guys try to do it with a title, don't give me a 50-word title. I'm not going to let you have it. I'm going to give you maybe 6. So title may be the right place to start. I don't know. That first sentence about what you're going to talk about, maybe the first paragraph or so, and then start laying out your ideas in the middle. That's your big ideas in the middle. And then at the end, tell them what you just talked about. Now, in that big idea in there is, why should I read this thing? Tell me why, as a reader, I should be interested in what you think is the most important idea on the planet, or ideas. And in 5,000 words, you're probably going to have really, at most, 3 or 4 really big ideas, probably maybe 3. The smaller your piece goes, the less ideas you really have time to put in there and make some sense of to explain it to someone. So I tend to use, at least the thinking that you'll get all sorts of bells ringing in my head if you grab me at first and tell me what you want to talk about, tell why it matters to me or to the security world, and then what you think we should do about it. How many of you have identified problems in your lives and gave the solution? Good. But then again, they may not like your solution, so you might want to come up with several. If you're a planner, like Dave mentioned, I spend a lot of time doing planning. When you come in front of a senior officer with your plan, if you got one solution, you got about 5 seconds to explain it before he's going to throw you out. Typically, they want to see at least 3 different courses of action, possibly, maybe 4. And what I usually did was load some really cool stuff in each one of those courses of action, and usually my bosses would say, great, Eliason, out you go. None of those work. I want you to come back with option 4, and that would be the best of breed of the other 3 options you came up with, because I figure you're not smart enough to come up with a 4th one that's original. Yes, sir, got it, out I go. But nonetheless, you're laying out a certain amount of ground on which your ideas rest, and trying to help the reader, in effect, do something with it. There are plenty of journals out there, and this may seem somewhat practical-minded. There are plenty of journals out there who allow you to wax eloquently about theories. And I know that you all take 500, and 500's got a lot of theories in it. I am a dyed-in-the-wool international relations PhD kind of guy from Old Dominion. It's a competitive program to this one, and believe me, I know all the theories. I don't say I understand them, I just know them. And I, unfortunately, am an editor of a journal that's in the practical world. Your average general admiral probably does not understand feminist theory. Okay, so laying that out for 4,000 words and then giving them, here's how you fix the world based on a feminist theory is probably not going to get into JFQ, just going to help you there. But there are plenty of journals within the poli-sci world that can help you go in that direction. You can use similar kinds of things. They probably will require a literature review, I won't. And you don't have to give me a bibliography either. All you have to do is use Chicago, I'll show you that in a minute, and do endnotes, and we're happy with each other. So, what do you want to talk about? Why does it matter? And then what should they do about it? Now, if you miss any one of those things, you still might get in, maybe. It depends on how well written it is. It might work. Here's the process laid out, and I'm demystifying this because most of you probably have no idea what a journal does internally. Other journals may do it completely different from us. I'm just telling you how to get through one place to get published if you want to try. I have an editorial board. I don't know if my bills are working right. I'm kind of old. You'll send it in to me, and it'll come into that little email site there, jfq1@ndu.edu. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know me personally. I read that mailbox religiously every day. And eventually what will happen next is I'll print it out. I make a nice little paper package because I'm old school. And I'll read it and I'll make notes on it. And then I will find some reviewers to go look at it if I think it is viable. If it's not viable, I'm not going to waste my reviewers' time. All of them on my editorial board you can see on the masthead. And others I use. By the way, Tom McNaughter, any of you have gotten him in 500. He's on my editorial board as an example. So these aren't evil people. I do use some of them more often than others. Professor Betts and I currently aren't talking to each other. He's up at Columbia. He's on my board. But maybe someday he'll write me back and say, I'm sorry, but maybe not. Or maybe I'll write him, I'm not sure. So, and then I'll hand it off to my editorial board. If I don't like it, it's going in the red bin. And you'll get a nice, very terse note from my executive editor, and he's a really great guy, Jeff Smotherman has a PhD in English rhetoric. He is the yin to my yang. I may like things from a concept point of view. I'm the concept guy, and he may say, boss, this is not English. I fought with him mightily to get a Japanese primary speaker who had a really great piece, but his English wasn't so good. And my copy editors still are cursing my and that guy's name simultaneously, but they'll get over it. I'm trying to expand into the international world as well. So that may happen to you, and the reject will come. That will come quicker than anything else. So if there's a long silence after you've sent it in to me, that's because you'll get first an email back from me that says I've got it under review. A very long one, and it may promise 3 months. It will say a goal of 3 months for review. If I'm lucky, it's 3. If you're lucky, it's 3. If not, it could be 6. It could be 9. We are a quarterly, not a weekly, not a daily. So I have to be very judicious in how I pick things, and it takes me time to get it through the process in some cases. I hope to do 3 months, but sometimes it's not as long. I also have another thing which virtually no other journal has to go through. Everything we publish has to go to the Pentagon to get looked at to find one of 3 things. Is it got classified information in it? Odds are, unless you guys hold a clearance, you're probably not talking classified stuff, and if you are, you just don't know it. Second is it in any way detrimental to the Department of Defense? That means while it may not be classified, it might uncover stuff that the department, not that they're trying to cover up, but that might be related to operations ongoing or something else that might be of classified nature or so on. And I don't know what those are. That's why I send it to these guys. They know all the classifications and all that stuff. I don't know it. And the third one is you cannot misquote DoD policy and start your argument from there. Yeah, I can't. You could, but it won't get past these guys, and then I can't publish it. So, and believe it or not, we have even sitting people within the department who misquote policy and come back. Now, the good news is it may go through this security review. Usually takes about 30 working days, maybe a little bit less, depending on your topic. And they may misclassify it, or may miss detrimental stuff, or they may miss the policy misquote, but they usually don't. I won't know. I mean, to me, I throw it over the fence. They put their stamp on it. I'm good as long as all the articles I got to push out are all cleared before we go to press. Everything's fine. And so once that review is complete and you got a thumbs up on yours, and all the other guys I'm trying to publish at the same time get a thumbs up, I'm ready to go to press at that point. I've got everything laid out and worked out with my compatriots at the government printing office and our printer we have out in St. Louis, and we go to press. You get an email along with everybody else that I'm publishing in that edition saying, congratulations, you're in. but that's way down the pike from when if you were rejected. And of course, you won't get the acceptance if you got the rejection, but you can try again. Here's the thing too, I would say, is not just for my journal or any other ones. Editors are human. They don't treat authors as if they were the enemy, although some may. And if you wanted to come back and ask me why it was rejected, because you won't normally get that in the rejection notice, because imagine I get 500 a year of these, each of them 5,000 words or so, and if I had to spend a conversation with each one of those 500 explaining why it didn't work, I wouldn't get much else done. As you know, I would have no time to come to Georgetown, I'd have no time to teach at Eisenhower, I'd have no time to play golf on the weekends, you know, that kind of stuff. So I try to, anyone who does engage me, I will come back if I can, and I pull that paper packet that we've already reviewed with the notes on it and try and give them some sense of where they went wrong. It may just be that it was just not formatted well. It may be that it's just not an issue that is of interest to what I would call the joint forces of the United States military. It could be a very important issue, but it's just, you know, like, I don't know, the impact of rice farming on small villages in the upper Tibetan regions. I mean, it's interesting. I'm not really sure that a broad military or security-related audience would have, unless you can tie it to global finances or something, I don't know. So we'll come back at you if we need any changes. We'll ask you to do the changes. You get the changes done. Your editorial staff will be helping you out there. That's an Eisenhower student, by the way, with his kid. And then it gets accepted and it gets published. And this is not the most latest one. We just didn't have the cover up yet for 77. That's 76. That's a Marine there. And to show you how this thing works, that issue, one of my students took to her office on Capitol Hill, and there's a Marine captain working in that office, saw this picture and said, "That guy's from my platoon." I mean, I randomly picked the cover. I don't know any of that. So if you think we're disconnected bodies just all kind of coming together because the schedule said so, there are probably less degrees of separation other than Georgetown amongst you than you're aware. And I'm just saying, Kevin Bacon game, if you know that one, I'm one step away from it. So figure out who's out there and what they're interested in, pitch your idea to them, see if it works. If it does, great, and then start writing. Now, a word of caution, most academic papers that you write for a class are for a specific learning objective as a part of that course. They may or may not work for a broader audience in a security journal. For example, all of you who've taken 501, I believe you write about Gettysburg. No, not Gettysburg, sorry, you write about the Overland Campaign. Fascinating. We probably produced, under Tom McDonough's reign of terror here at Georgetown, thousands of reviews of the Overland Campaign of 1864. Probably won't work for JFQ, although I'll tell you in a minute, I do have a section about history stuff, and if you could get the joint angle in there and, you know, make it work, maybe it would, maybe it won't. But that one was also probably about 2,500 words, so it's a fairly short one. And it's for a specific academic objective. Now, you'll have courses where you're doing research and writing about the ideas you like, and those papers may or may not work for a security journal like mine or someone else's. If you know that journal and what their mission is, and if you've read that journal, understand kind of the things they're looking for and the styles they accept, you're halfway home. I mean, you can try and be unique if you want to, but if you write something that's really not within the kind of styles and topics of that journal, you're shooting at the wrong target, and it's just wasting their and your time. So make sure you've got where you want to go first, have read up on what's going on, see the kind of themes that they have and the discussions they have, and you can either pick something they're not talking about that they should be. That's probably going to get you in there quicker than something that's already been written about. Because if, in the case of JFQ, one of the big themes in my 4.5 years has been cyber. I'm about played out on cyber. I've read hundreds of submissions about cyber, and the problem is they start talking about the same thing over and over and over again. I've already published it once. I look for original stuff. It's another key I have here as well. If you publish part or all of your piece somewhere else, I can't touch it. I have to have 100% original stuff. That's the way it works. And that way I, can be a little more selective. So here's the checklist. I've got a submission guidelines. You don't have to write this down. If you go on the website, you'll find it in the upper left-hand corner. You click there and it'll tell you everything you need to know. If you follow all the rules in there, great. If you don't, I'm still going to read it anyway. And if it's so out of the ballpark in terms of not having it in the guidelines, then I'll probably push you back to you and say, here's the guidelines. You didn't read them, obviously, and try it again. Now, you guys are smart guys, but believe it or not, even serving officers somehow can't read instructions for whatever reason. They can explain that to you. As I said, can't have been published in whole or part before. I got in a Eliason battle with a professor at the Naval War College and another one who was one of Professor Betts's at Columbia's proteges. They'd already published 60% of what they gave me in Orbis. I wrote them a nice little note back. I'd only been in the job about 2 months, but that rule I did know. I said, dudes, you ain't getting past me. And they argued hard and long. I even went up and saw one of them at his office at the Naval War College, and basically, at a relatively loud level of his voice, we agreed to disagree, and I walked out. I mean, I am the gatekeeper. I kind of have to stick to my rules, otherwise I'll publish anything, and I'm not going to publish anything that will get me fired. And I kind of like my job. And if you can find a job where you take little dots and move them from one side of the screen and back, and they pay you 6 figures, man, hang on to that. Just saying. I used to do it at altitude in an airplane. It was even better, but I got paid less, and it was much more dangerous. So this is key thing here is I once rejected an article that had joint in the title and the word joint in the first sentence. After that, it was a love poem to a single services weapon system. I think 2 services actually had the weapon system, but the other service's name was never mentioned in the article. So it was all about what? Please don't cut the funding to this weapon system. Please, 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 please don't do that. Or I would call a love poem to that weapon system. That's what it was, written by 2 colonels and a captain. Oh, whoops, I gave away what service it might be. And I'm pretty sure the colonels didn't write it. The captain did. Fairly well written. But again, it really wasn't joint. It was basically arguing that the Army, shouldn't cut this weapon system. And so I said, hey, that doesn't work for me. I'm a joint journal. I kind of have to have joint stuff. So I sent a nice little 2-line rejection, forgot about it. Those 2 colonels talked to their boss, who was a very famous Army general, who came and saw my Army general, who came and saw my boss at the time, who was an Army colonel. Army colonel came to see me and says, how tough is it to get published in JFQ? I says, I don't know, it's not too tough. About 1 in 4, what's the problem? I said, well, humma, article, love poem. I said, I don't remember that one. Let me look that up. Because, like I said, I do hundreds of these things. I look it up, I go, oh yeah, love poem to the blah, 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 blah system. Joint in the title, joint in the first paragraph. That's it. You want to read it? I'll give it to you. No, that's a good story. Tell you what, let's take that to the boss. And so next thing I know, I'm talking to the 2-star who's running the university, and this other general from his Army service is coming in to talk to him, wants to know what the answer is, what the problem with Eliason, what kind of an asshole is he, and so on. And I explained to him. The boss said, hey, great, Bill, it's good, doing great, see you later. I haven't heard from any of those guys since. So the other guy was HR master. Don't let him bother you. So, is it well written? If you're not familiar with the Chicago Style Manual, there are many different style manuals. Most people like to pick the easiest style manual to work with. I think APA is probably the easiest one for a writer to work with, because all you really have to do is put in, I think it's in this one, I don't remember what page it is, look at my bibliography. Sorry, I'm really an anti-APA kind of guy. It's just really not very scholarly for what kinds of stuff we do. If you are a scholar and you are looking at someone else's writing, don't you want to know where he got that from? Because there might be even better ideas than he cited in that work. You might want to read that one a little bit more, add it to what the research you're doing. Well, okay, Chicago allows you that ability to get right to where the person came from. Well, from a publisher's point of view, I want to publish something that's not true, if I can help it. Or a bad site, or somebody that's plagiarized, and it's hard enough to figure that out these days, but I have safe assign, so it works for me. But really, Chicago Manual, everything is in there. If you're not familiar with it, it's Turabian. If you're older like I am, it kind of comes from that same style. I think we, at least my students do, write pretty much with Chicago, and I'm okay with that. If you give it to me in some other style, we may not reject it because of that. If we like the writing, we may just come back to you and say, hey, dude, you got to change it out of APA and put it in Chicago, and we're good to go. It may take a little time, and you may be pushed to another issue a little later, but that's okay. I already mentioned about the U.S. policy thing. That's got to be right. I'm an American government journal. I can't say the policy of the United States is to destroy all the other countries on the planet. Come on. So, I mean, you'd be surprised what you read. Cited and referenced, Chicago, not APA or others, whatever, is unclassified. And here's the last one. If you don't like somebody and you're writing your screed to make that person hurt, go somewhere else. I'm not going to take it. I came on board and there was actually a smoking hole in the deck that had actually, someone had cited Bob Woodward, I think, in a piece, and he was critical of a certain chairman of the Joint Chiefs who had retired since but was working at NDU. It took about 30 seconds after that article went up online before that general went to the boss, and the boss went to the then editor at the time and said, who do you think you are? So My job in life is to not create a second smoking hole in the deck with my name on it and continue to be the editor for as long as my wife will let me. And so if you have an axe to grind, go find somebody in some blog somewhere and knock yourself out. What you should be about is scholarly, well thought out, reasoned argument, the things that Georgetown has taught you to do, and make your case. That doesn't mean you have to have something that everyone agrees with. That's different from axe grinding. Axe grinding is personal. You all know about trolls and all that stuff. I mean, I'm just learning these words. I just mimic them in public. The trolling, blogging kind of stuff, it doesn't work for a scholarly journal, and it does no good for you as a budding person in the professional world. Zero. I know of no one who is probably working on the National Security Council staff because they know how to take somebody apart in a blog by being a troll. I'm pretty sure that won't get you really through the first interview, I don't think. Hey, look at my resume. I've been blogging and trolling people for 10 years. No. So, great brief. Here's, note the Socratic method I'm about to use here. Why would you want to be in JFQ? For my military audiences, to get them out of that, I don't want to be known as the guy who wrote about X, Y, or Z, I start naming names of people who wrote in JFQ 20 years ago, and in some cases, they're now retired at the 4-star rank. Anybody heard of some guy by the name of Stavridis? Anybody know about him? He's running the Fletcher School. You should know that he's some guy named Stavridis. He used to be the Sakier, for crying out loud. His first published article was in JFQ as a commander way back when. So, start early. And you guys are in the early phase. There may be some of you who passed your 30th birthday in the room, not too many I'm figuring. Start now and build your vitae as you go. Your first one may not be great, that's okay. Nobody is Henry Kissinger in this room, I'm suspecting. You might be better actually, but you've heard about, well, he has this wonderful treatise that was his doctoral dissertation and they made a book out of it and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that may not be you. You build a house foundation one at a time, I'm thinking. You may lay down a big slab of concrete. I don't know how you do that, but you should start somewhere. And this isn't a bad place to start because I've told you the things you're thinking about may be at a different angle than what your average uniform person might be thinking about the very same topic. You may have specialized experience or learning that you did through research. You've been to parts of the planet that your average soldier, sailor, airman, marine, coast guardman, did I miss anybody? Sailor, may not have been to. It's possible. That might relate to something they want to know about. Your network of people may help you, and because you're at Georgetown, if your name comes in with Georgetown University in your byline, I'm not going to go, oh, they're idiots. I'm not taking anything from those guys. No, I mean, I know you, so that helps. If you come from East Stroudsburg State University in Pennsylvania, I don't know you so well. I do know that's where my gym teacher in high school came from, but that's about it. So, once you have your answer to this question, and you've written 5,000 words or less, send it right there. And you may become a part of one of these things. You probably will not be on the front cover, sorry. And a couple of minor things, you don't have to send me graphics and pictures. If you want to, you can. We pretty much pick our own pictures and own graphics. Sorry, I'm not used to running in front of a camera or running from one. But graphics are a little bit complicated for us. If you must, get them in as high a resolution quality as you possibly can. If it's a picture, JPEGs or GIFs or GEFs, depending on how you pronounce it, really don't work for us, and we typically have every DoD photographer out there working for us. They don't know it, but they are. And we get it for free. And anything I can do for free is good because I am working off of taxpayers' dollars, and they squeeze it every year tighter every year than the year before. So this is the leanest and meanest journal you're probably ever going to see made by the United States government, but it has an almost infinite variety of things that you could write about that might be interesting, and only you will know what that is based on your experience. There. I can tell you thousands of other stories, and my students know that. I have plenty. But what can I do to help you get published? What questions do you have? Anybody, be the first. Go ahead. Somebody must have one question out there.
Bill, if I'm writing my
Dave, go ahead.
my 710 thesis, and I've got about 10,000 words in there.
Yep.
Can I take the work I've done, the research I've done, that, and turn it into a journal article?
Yes. You can even take something as long as a dissertation that's, mine, I guess minus the appendices, is 300 plus pages, double spaced. I probably could turn that into a journal article. In fact, I have. At least a conference piece. I took each of my chapters and kind of boiled them down to something smaller cleaned them up, did a little bit more research than what I did it the first time through. Turned to a couple of my peers, asked them what they thought about it. In the area I do academically, I got a whole center that's in the research part of the NDU, which those guys are happy to take a look at my stuff and tell me how silly I am, because they're professionals and I'm sort of an amateur at it. But yeah, you can take almost anything that you've written, either expand it or contract it. But what you probably should do is take a look how long it's been since you wrote it. Time goes by, things change. So if you're talking about the Soviet Union in the first person present term, you probably need to update your stuff a little bit like I do in class. That was the world I grew up in, like Dave. You know, it's something that it's better to have tried and been rejected than to take no shot at all. Because if you are planning an academic career after this place, you gotta publish. I mean, gotta. It's part of the deal. What else? Surely you must have somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, so my name is Kitty, and I'm about to finish this program.
Congratulations. I have no idea what the other end looks like. I see him at the beginning. I don't see him at the end very much.
So I'm trying to gather my thoughts into a question.
Okay.
I think I would like to hear some advice on how to deal with the review process as a writer. Because I had this situation earlier this year where I submitted a piece to a journal and I did not hear back from them for 3.5 months.
Nice.
And I didn't even get the confirmation that they actually got the piece.
Right.
And so by the time that I heard from them and they had accepted the paper, I had already published it somewhere else just because it took so long.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to best approach this issue.
First, I would say probably 99 times out of 100, that won't be a problem with me, because what happens is, at the longest it might be is a week or two, depending on what my other schedule is doing to me. I will have dipped into that email box, and if you have sent me something saying this is submission, the first thing I do is pull it up. I'll open it, see if it fits most of what I remember to be the submission guidelines. If it looks good there, I will print that, and then I have a canned email I send back. I literally pull down in Microsoft Word the signature thing, and I hit JFQ submission. I put your name at the top of it, Dear Kitty, and then there's like, I don't know, a couple paragraphs in there about how the process sort of works, a little bit less than what I gave you today. And that is the handshake that comes back to you. So if you hear the sound of my voice, if you sent something to JFQ and it's gone more than a week or two and you have not heard, ping it one more time or pick up the phone and call me and knock me on the forehead and say, hey, knucklehead, I sent you something, how come I haven't at least heard back from you? I think it's somewhat scandalous professionally in the journal business not to acknowledge an author submission. The downside is I tend to be much slower on the reverse side when it comes time to rejection or acceptance, so that long period of time is where I frustrate my authors, I'm sure. But then that's the deal. All of my reviewers are volunteers, so I can't really do anything more than say, please turn your review back in. And in some cases, it may take a very, very long time for that reviewer, and I may choose other reviewers. So that's the inside of my ball game. But other journals, it may be because they just have, their staff got small. Dave's running a journal, it's him and interns. There's another journal at the National Defense University, which used to be under the NDU Press. It's not for a number of reasons, mostly having to do with budget cuts. Called Prism. That's run by a gentleman by the name of Michael McClatchick. He sits in a room right next to me and does a journal mostly related to things that the Department of State would be talking, diplomacy, that kind of thing. And he does his deal with nothing but interns. So it takes him a little longer. He's not a quarterly. He's sort of semi-annually every third of the year or so. I got a professional team, and I am the front end of that. So your submission, I'm the guy responsible for telling you, as a part of my lovely salary, that you did submit. So you can either bug those guys. The only thing I would say is, in that scenario you gave me, if you pulled it back and published it somewhere else, you should have a professional courtesy to tell the editor you first sent it to that you're no longer in competition, please remove it, because, oh, by the way, it's possible if you don't, they may publish it and not tell you, and so now you're in two different places, and that's sort of awkward. By the way, that one about the love poem to the thing, those guys published it in 3 different journals other than mine. They were so mad at me. They're happy, I guess, they're happy. But yeah, in the professional publishing world, you should get some sort of response from your initial go. So I wouldn't wait more with an editor more than a week before sending a follow-up email, or even you can write an old snail mail letter to them that tends to get more attention these days because you don't get very many. I know where the mailroom is, I think. I do. So that's unfortunate for you, but I wouldn't give up. You did the right thing though. You found another venue which did accept it, and if your piece is important to you and you're willing to put it out there, you have to be persistent. That's another trait I would say of the really great authors is they are persistent. They will continue to come after editors until they knock one of them over and get through to be published. I mean, you have to. Otherwise, I got 499 other people coming in this year. You're just one of them, and if you're not interested in being persistent, but then again, I've been lucky in almost 17 editions. I've not double published anything. In other words, I haven't had somebody not hear from me and then decide to give up on me and then go publish somewhere else. And it's good because it's embarrassing, really. And the citations get kind of squirrely for students like you. You know, which one do I cite? Do I cite that one or this one? Do I cite both of them? So sorry that happened to you. 5,000 words or less. It sounds like an interesting topic. I also will tell you that authors who've been published with me before kind of get a little bit easier go than those who are brand new because they're established. And that's the same reason why I would say if it's not JFQ, find some other place. If you have published before, you know the drill and you know how to write properly. And that is, surprised, the editors will know that. They will take your name, like I do, and they will Google it in a Google Scholar and find out where you've been. That's what I do. That's partly also a defensive mechanism, so I can find out you're not pushing something at me that's already been published. So, we're sort of smart people. Not as smart as the authors, but sort of smart. Hopefully that answers your question. Yes, sir?
I presume writing shorter, more concise pieces is better.
I would say as short as you probably want to go is about 2,000 words. The problem with shorter is, as I mentioned in the talk, how many big ideas are you going to roll into that? 2,500 words, about 10 pages, double-spaced-ish. And you all know with writing your essays for 501 how hard it is to get that in there and do the entire overland campaign in 10 pages or less. So, but if you have one really great idea with some other interesting things to go with it, it may be a small one, that's fine. If you're responding to somebody else's article as a follow-on or a different kind of point of view, then maybe a shorter one might work. I think the smallest one I probably published is in the neighborhood of 1,800, 2,000 words. But that doesn't prejudice it. I would say if you're at the other end, the longer it takes me to read the darn thing, the longer it's going to take me to make a decision. So maybe shorter is better. I think the real sweet spot is probably around about 3,000, maybe 3,500, 4,000 words. You get more than 5,000 words, and my audience just going to stop reading. They're going to go on to something else. It just like you guys, they're really into 144 characters before the next grenade comes in. I mean, that's kind of. I have found that some people write better writing shorter than writing longer. So whatever works for you. Yes, sir.
In terms of format, let's say we have a piece that we submitted in class that's in a memo format. Mm-hmm. Would it be okay to submit it as such, or should we convert it into more of a scholarly piece, or is that something that happens later?
What will happen is I don't have the resources to improve your writing that much. I have resources, my editors are good enough to take you from 95% to 100%. They're not going to take you from 75. So if you give me something that's sort of broken, if I like it, I'm likely to come back to you and say you need to recook it a little bit longer. And I might give you a couple of suggestions about how to do that. And then once you come back and do that the second time, I will not put you back through the long review. Or maybe I will, depending on whether I've gone to my reviewers with it or not. Typically, a weak piece will not get to my reviewers, so it can. I would say the formatting is probably the least of your concerns. It's really the good ideas and the quality of the writing. To that question, I would say go read the journal and see what articles in it that are in your area and get a sense of what they've already staked out for territory and the quality and style of the writing. I'm not a high English kind of guy. I did not learn how to write in high academic form. So I'm telling you, your audience, if you're doing high academic form stuff, I'm going, okay, that'll probably be read by the 5 or 6 professors out there in international relations who still read JFQ, and that's it. I am all about trying to increase your audience, my audience, and getting your ideas across to how that works. If your audience is very small or narrow, write your paper, send it to that person, whoever it is, like a letter. You know, you guys may remember what letters are like. You know, if you're really targeting, you know, Professor Maxwell and you're not in his class, but you want him to think about your ideas and help you go to some other venue with it or whatever, or improve it, then go after them. One of the things that the professors have a responsibility to is if we birthed you guys, we own you. From now until the last time you write anything important or do anything important in your careers, you have a right to come back at us at any time and ask us, hey, you know, you talked about in 501 about the Overland campaign, and I really think that Grant was a butcher. I don't want to retract what I thought there. I think that really Lee was just a misunderstood guy. Okay. Write me 5,000 words. We'll see if that plays. I mean, but so you have a relationship with your professors that should last a lifetime, really, if you want to. And a lot of my professors I may or may not want to talk to. Just okay. But from a writing point of view, you should use whatever resources you can to improve your product before you go at an editor. That raises your chances of getting through the first time. You want to get through the first time if you can. Because if I mentioned this in class multiple times, any of you are watching old time television, from like the 50s or 60s, and you know of a thing called I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball and her friend Ethel Mertz are trying to work money for some project they got going on, and they get hired to a chocolate factory. And if you've ever seen the scene, look it up on Google if you haven't. It starts out fairly slowly, and they're able to keep up with the pace of things, and then all of a sudden they double the speed of the production line, and they can't keep up wrapping these candies, so they decide we're going to start stuffing them in their pockets wherever they can. They start eating them, doing whatever they can. I'm not quite that level of distraction, but I'm close. So, and all editors typically are. So we're going to deal with the easiest thing for me to read and match the mission and would engage what we think the audience is and publish. That's where I'm going. I am a very practical guy that way. That's a long answer to a short question. What else? Come on, I got some other ideas. What kind of ideas do you want to write about? I mean, ask me what kind of themes you're interested in writing about, and I'll tell you whether it might work. I can do that game. Sir.
Well, you mentioned about a history section in JFQ.
Yeah. It's called the recall section. If you go in, as you will, dissect JFQ and kind of look at it, let me tell you another inside baseball. We don't have any themes in mind for this. By the way, anybody know where this is? Very good. That's El Capitan, man. Very good. You know, my internet editor, she's about 30. She's a woman of the web. She's got this on her Apple too. She had no idea what it was. I wouldn't have either, except I visited her last year with the wife. And anyway, it looks like an organized journal, and it's got titles on the front and really cool pictures, and it's well organized and well laid out. Well, let me tell you, when we sit down, my executive editor and I, with the accepted pieces we want to place in the journal, they're all over the map. I mean, we have all sorts of topics and stuff, and so between Jeff and I, we kind of try to bin them into the sections. The one that would be easiest to be produced, and you're not in a history program, you're in an international relations program, so I caution you. These two things are like oil and water. They sort of don't mix well, according to their disciplines. I am an interdisciplinary guy. My class has heard me say this a million times. I got degrees in history, I got degrees in IR. Depending on what you want to talk about, I love both of them. They don't like each other much professionally, but they should. They're kind of working opposite ends of things. I have a recall section which basically tries to have the writer, if they're targeting that, take some example from history and try to find the good or bad of the services working or not working together. Now you could say, well, gee, that should only be since 1986 and later. No. You could write about the Civil War if you wanted to. There are joint operations, not the way we would call them today, but you could make that argument back then. Anytime Grant was using riverboats, that's a joint op. Anytime you're doing an amphibious op with the Army, circa 1863, and there are other parts and pieces going on there. Now, mind you, if you're going to talk about the Civil War, it's kind of hard to get the Air Force involved there.
Those observation balloons.
Yeah, and artillery sort of qualifies. So, but ultimately, what you're trying to provide is a historical lesson that students might read about how to improve by not doing something that the past was bad, or a reminder of things that they might not be aware of. All of my students, I think, I was born in '58, so you can do the math. I was too young to go to Vietnam. I know about Vietnam from watching it on TV and my brothers and friends of his who got drafted and all that. That's all I know. But I I can read about it, and I can have some opinions about it, and there are probably joint lessons from that time period as well, which is well before Goldwater Nichols. So you could write about history of, it doesn't have to be about military either. It could be something that's more of a diplomatically related thing. It could be somebody else's military and their struggle with trying to get their forces to work together. And I don't get very many of those historical pieces. So odds are pretty close to 100%. If it's well written, it's going to go in. I've been lucky. 17 issues. I've had a recall article for each one. And many quarters, it came right down to the wire. But I also have professors in various different colleges and universities who know that that is something that can feed me, and they feed me. So I have a vast network. I'm on LinkedIn too. If you're not there, go look for me. I'm there. That's another way to get a hold of me if you want to. So recall is the history piece. We got the other ones I mentioned about putting it together. We try to have the ones that kind of group together. They became the main topic. You'll see in the mast on the front cover is the main topic, and it's loosely worded typically because they're not always going to be binned correctly. This last issue that's up now, 77, a lot of technological things in there. A couple of pieces about big data and how that helps intelligence or doesn't. And so that sort of became that theme. I try to do interviews every once in a while with one of the 4-stars who are a joint command commander or with the joint chiefs. I've interviewed all the current serving joint chiefs or had an article from them except for the new commandant of the Marine Corps. And they're all interesting. They're people just like you. They put their clothes on in the morning, go to work, and try to figure out how to get, close to 500,000 people to have some sense of order. That's what they do. And they all are very experienced people, and I go and sit with them and ask them questions that they already know what the answers are. It's easy. I don't try to do gotcha stuff with them. That wouldn't be fair. It's not what it's about. So you can probably find a topic that would fit for almost any of those things that you want to write about, and then I will bin them on what section it goes into, so you don't have to worry about that. But recall is special. It's just history. That's its purpose. If you want to write about the U.S. military's joint doctrine, we have a doctrine section, which my peers, if you will, or superiors at the joint staff, they own that. Typically their guys on the staff will write the piece for that, but I do get doctrine pieces from time to time. And all I have to do is converse with the J7 guys, and they typically go along with me because I am the publisher, and get it in that way. So maybe most of you are probably not doctrine kind of wonks yet. Maybe you will be at some point. I'm not. I leave that to other people to argue. What else? Still food left.
Bill, I have a question on that.
Yes,
The
sir.
editorial process and peer review process, and I mean, you said 95 to 100%, but sometimes, and this is just in general, not JFQ specific.
Yeah.
What's your advice for dealing with editorial changes to your work, and that process back and forth? When do you what's a red line?
You may remember my admonition about working in the Pentagon. It probably works in any other organization you go to too. Don't fall in love with your paper.
Yeah.
It's not your kid. I have 3 children. They're all grown adults and they're all working. They're nothing like anything I've ever written. I would sacrifice anything I put down on paper in a heartbeat for the lives of my kids. So make sure you get that stuff separate. Now, most of you are not married or have kids, but you are a kid of somebody. I guarantee you your parents are more interested in you than they are what you wrote. So don't fall in love with your stuff. It's not personal. It's a business, as they say in The Godfather. But what can happen is if you don't like the feedback or lack thereof it that you get, then take your piece and shop it some other place. But I highly recommend that if you get a reject notice from somebody, it doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. It's not necessarily the case. It just may mean that they, in my case, it could be if you wrote about cyber or something, I've had 15 cybers I'm already printing, I just can't use another one, and I won't hold you back from getting published, so I'll just politely say I don't need you and go somewhere else with it. If I get something that doesn't fit me, this is something I didn't talk about. If I get something that's well written, a good topic, doesn't fit me, I know all the other military journal editors, all of them, know them personally, have a relationship with them. If it's a high quality piece, it just doesn't fit my mission, the first thing I'm going to do is shop it somewhere else. I'm going to take it to one of those guys and say, this would work in parameters or military review. It's about the Army and how they want to reorganize the left-handed smoke shifting battalions for better civil affairs. Not really a joint thing, so it would work for them, or maybe it wouldn't. And again, if you've studied the journals you're trying to go after, you know what their publishing cycle is. Proceedings, for example, that's done by the United States Naval Institute over in Annapolis, those guys are a monthly. That means they got 3 times the demand I got for stuff. So your chances of getting published there are about 3 times as good as they are with me. But they also aren't going to publish your stuff if you're writing about how the Air Force should better organize, train, and equip itself. It just doesn't fit them. But the guys down there in Space Power Journal at Maxwell would fit them. I know all of those guys do. So, and all of us are kind of in our niches, and we all know each other within that world. Now, beyond that, I don't have a lot of relationship with the commercial side of the house. For example, I don't know anybody at the Washington Post. I know of Tom Ricks, but I don't know him personally. You know, that's just, I haven't been around long enough, I guess. I do know the power of a guy like him, though. And my university has had some issues lately. Anyway, we can talk about that some other time if you want. But so, if the editor is giving you static and you're not really certain, you have a right to write the guy back and say, well, what do you mean? And he may not write you back at all, in which case you're going somewhere else. Find someone else to eventually who will accept your work, assuming it's quality. And again, that's why you get that peer chop thing. You may think you're the hottest writer ever, but like I said, if you hand it to these 4 people right here and they don't know what the heck you're talking about, maybe not so much. Just saying. It could be so over their heads that they're never going to get it. I still don't understand Einstein's theory of relativity. Doesn't mean you didn't write it well. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but continue to be persistent and ask yourself those basic questions. Does it fit that journal style and format? Is it in their mission? Is it the right length or so on? Is it, are my ideas disconnected? As I mentioned for JFQ, have you done the what, so what, now what thing? Other journals may not require all of those things. They will require what are you talking about and why is it important. I trust you. That's the basics for writing good English papers. So they may not need the requirements for recommendations and so on. I don't know if that answers that. Sir.
You said to look at some of the JFQ's past articles
Yeah.
to see what you guys are into.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the burning questions in the joint community now that sort of wrestling with?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, not that tough. I think the hardest thing within the joint community is to get people to write about jointness. It sounds funny, but when you're brought up in a particular culture or world, that's what you know, and you're most comfortable in that. I would argue one of the things you guys went to school for was to learn about stuff you're not comfortable in. You may not like those classes that force you to actually think and write hard about stuff. You're going, I don't have any idea what they're talking about. This whole Went stuff, I'm having to read him and I don't get that at all. But in the joint world, having the services work together, the number of people who actually do that is a very, very tiny sliver of the Department of Defense. You begin at basic training thinking about every waking moment why it was you signed up to be brainwashed into believing the United States Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force is the greatest place on the planet and you're not worthy of being a part of them. And then you get a little older and you go, holy crap, you mean there's something other than the fill in the blank? And I have to work with those guys? I hate them. Those guys, the first thing they do is set up a golf course. They only want to go TDY and live in a hotel. They're not out in the dirt with us, real men/women. And so you get all these cultural things banging, and we Americans love competition. Military guys love competition. So the way the services grew up over the millennia were to compete with the enemy, and some would say even more so with themselves, because the budget is fixed. And in reality, by the way, the services get about an equal amount of the pie over the last 40 years. So, killing off my weapon system so you can get money for yours doesn't really happen in the Department of Defense. It goes to some other place, like my retirement. I don't know. So why are these services having these Nicene battles about roles and missions and cultures and stuff? And they're mostly talking amongst themselves. And this is up until about 1986. So the chairman at the time, a guy by the name of David C. Jones, who was an Air Force officer, said, enough of this. We need to go to Congress and get legislation to force the services to actually work together. And there were a number of things that happened in history that were evidence that the services were not working well together. If you know your history, when we tried to save the Iranian hostages back in 1980, it was a horrible thing. We were basically asking highly trained people to do stuff they had never done before and get it right the first time. Imagine taking a class you know nothing about, and 2 days later, they ask you to write your end of course paper. Ready, go. You gonna get an A? So, that's the admiral going by.
So, yeah, he may be coming here soon, so.
So the answer is, anything that talks about how to find lessons to help improve the relationships of the services, that would be good. A lot of folks right now kind of go down the path of arguing about whether a system X, Y, or Z should be procured or not procured. Personally, I believe, for example, the fight over the F-35 is over. It's just a matter of how many we're gonna get. So why are you shooting behind that argument? You should be arguing about how to integrate it better into forces and maybe figure out how to sustain it and then use it in combat, because not only are 3 services using it, by the way, the Army's involved now too. They're doing software. Think about that. Fighter jet, Army software. And we've also got 7 different international countries that are buying it in various different versions. It's being produced overseas and so on. So I would like to hear, and I just got an article that talks about how the thing's going to actually be employed. What are they going to basically use it for? Will it answer the Air Force's questions about retiring the A-10 and bringing on the F-35? Can it do that mission? General Wall says yes. Others are arguing. Okay, that's sort of a joint issue, potentially. So, go ahead.
Just to feel that idea,
Yeah.
because you said to talk about jointness, but a lot of times we talk about jointness within our own services.
Yeah.
But I'm an international security guy, so
Yeah.
I do international stuff.
Right.
But in the sense that, like, if you look at all the times America had to do joint operations with other countries, other militaries,
Equal
that's
input.
fall into
Yep.
your purview.
How well, you're looking at, and Dave's done it too, he's a special forces guy, I wasn't, but even in my 30-year career, I spent 14 of them in either an international or a joint billet, day to day. One of my best friends on the planet still, he Facebooks me almost every other week, is my Korean counterpart. When I was a colonel, he was a colonel, and we worked together there to figure out how to defend Korea from the horde that might be coming from the north. So these relationships and how they are sustained over time, how they would be better improved and so on, is really tricky business, because you help one guy and the other one who's his neighbor says, hey, you're not paying attention to me. How does the United States, for example, and I go for strategic stuff all the time. I've talked really about maybe the operational or joint things in this question. If you're gonna write about how the Asia Pacific pivot, rebalance, whatever, is gonna work out in relationships between countries X, Y, or Z, that's perfectly good for JFQ. We do those things. There's one in 77, you look it up right now, talks about what happens if we do go to war in that region. Well, how do you keep it from escalating? A guy from Rand wrote that one by the name of Manzo. He's written for me before. It's a great piece, I think. You may not, and that's okay. And then you write me one that's better. So hopefully that helps. Any other questions you have, like I said, email me, call me, whatever you'd like to do. I prefer that you don't send me an abstract, because then I have to play with you twice. And if, I'll make it, everyone in the sound of my voice, if you identify somebody as somebody who was at Georgetown and you went to my briefing and all that stuff up front when you send the thing in, I won't reject it in the first 30 seconds, I swear. I will actually read it, I read them all anyway, but I will probably, if it doesn't work, I'll be nice enough to at least send you a couple of sentences back about why it doesn't work. I'll take it on personally to do the reject notice. I don't normally do that. I have a guy for that. I like to do the good news. He gets to do the bad news. It's kind of, so don't be shy. I am an educator at first and every second. Thanks for being a great audience. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Bill. I think this
Thanks,
was,
thanks for the
I think
opportunity.
everyone will agree with me, this was not only interesting, useful, but entertaining as well. So, thank you very much.